So, okay, I'm going to first start by summarizing the basic fine-tuning argument, and I'm going to use that visually with the square. So the square, it's a 1x1 unit square, and the area of the square is going to be used to represent probability. So, like, take a indeterministic event like coin toss. There's a 50-50 chance of it being heads or tails, and we could represent that as the area of this square. So 50% of the area of the square is heads, 50% of the area of this square is tails. So we could also break up the area of this square for more complicated events, like say I have a red coin and a green coin. We could have then 4 events: heads, heads, tails, heads, heads, tails, tails, tails. And all these events are equally likely, so they take up a fourth of the probability space. And also I need to mention what happens when we get new information. Like say one of the coins lands on heads, what do we do? Well, if you notice the bottom of the square here, the pink and the orange parts, they have the red coin landing tails. So we know that the pink and the orange are impossible. So what we do is we just erase them from the square. But now we have this kind of more, we have a rectangle, not a square. We got to stretch the remaining 2 possibilities to fill up the entire square, so we get 50-50. There's now a 50% chance of getting heads, heads, and tails, heads. How'd that sound, Zach? Making sense so far?
I think it's pretty straightforward when we're looking at like probability and like the nature of the fine-tuning argument. So what Square is doing is, before we get into like responding to Nathan and whatnot, we're kind of trying to get the gist of the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah,
at least how
exactly.
we're talking about it today.
Mm-hmm. And what with the fine-tuning argument, there are different ways of like cashing out what probability is, but we're talking about like epistemic probability. That's how probable something is, that as far as an agent can tell, basically. So the googolith digit of pi, is it even? That's a proposition. We could talk about the probability of it. If it's a 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, then it's even. If it's 1, 3, 5, or 7, or 9, then it's odd. And as far as I can tell, it's a 50-50 shot. I have no reason to believe it's odd or even. No human has calculated pi that far, I think. So it's just a 50-50 shot. Even though, if the googolith digit of pi is even, it's mathematically impossible for it to be odd. And if the googolith digit of pi is odd, then it's mathematically impossible for it to be even. So the probabilities here are, as far as an individual agent can tell, not actually what is metaphysically or logically possible. We could also talk about other propositions like, is this number here prime? Well, I happen to know the mathematical factoid that the bigger a number is, the less likely it is to be prime. So I think it's really probably not prime. But as you could probably see fairly quickly, epistemic probability is also going to vary a lot depending upon a given agent, what facts they know. Like you might already happen to just know off the top of your head that that number is prime, but I don't. So, and I haven't checked it. So that, yeah, that's kind of an idea of probability here. So now here's what the standard fine-tuning argument is going to look like. We have theism and naturalism. Here I've drawn them as roughly the same prior probability, like the same starting out probability. You might think one has quite a leg up on the other, but pretty soon that's not going to matter because we're going to look at a piece of data. So we're going to first, we're going to look at a piece of data soon, but before that, sorry, don't want to get ahead of myself. We're going to color in theism and naturalism with the colors green and red. Green will represent the probability that we'll get a fine-tuned universe, and red is going to represent the probability we're going to get a non-fine-tuned universe. So coloring in theism, we get that most of it's probably going to be green, because if theism is true, you have like a god who's all good and stuff, and wouldn't he create a fine-tuned universe? Like, I mean, obviously there's going to be some red because God could decide to not create a universe, but you get a good chance of God creating a fine-tuned universe. Now, for naturalism, we're going to color in green and red the epistemic probabilities. And smart people with lab coats and PhDs and expensive supercomputers and all that have run all the calculations, and they found that actually naturalism is just a sea of red with one green dot. So like, that is to say, if you vary the constants, the physical constants that appear in all our fun physics equations, you very quickly get a non-life permitting universe, a universe that can't have life in it. It's only in this very small range, this green dot of values, that you can actually get any life in it. Now, Zach, do we happen to live in a universe that can support life?
Well, you know the universe is 99.99% life prohibiting, so it's obviously a red universe. But no,
No, no,
it's a
no.
green one.
Well, okay, well, the fact that there are people in it, though, is what the fine tuning argument cares about.
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so the universe is a fine tune. That is to say, like we got the coin flip earlier, that gave us new information. The fact that we live in a universe with life in it, that is some information that we care about. And so that means we basically gotten a green dot. We know we know that the green is true, basically. So that means we have to get rid of all the red. But now that we've gotten all the red, we need to get a square again. So we're going to stretch all the probability space that's green and in equal proportions until we filled up the whole square. But what happens then is that theism is basically just going to dominate the entire probability space. And here, let me get their colors back to blue and yellow. Whereas naturalism now just occupies this tiny space of the probability space here. Theism dominates. We're virtually certain now that theism is true. So that's the fine-tuning argument in a nutshell, visualized with this square. I like squares.